Hey everybody, Joe Regnola here, and I know it's been a while since I made a video, but I'm back. And today I want to talk to you about something I call the gluten sensitivity spectrum. And I use this as sort of a way to illustrate what's happening with gluten sensitivity and celiac disease, and the fact that it's not just this on-off switch. So, the conventional wisdom and sometimes the not so conventional wisdom is that it's this black and white issue. It's either you have celiac disease or you don't, and if you don't, you're free to eat all the wheat and gluten you want and be perfectly fine. Well, what I want to try to show you is that that's not exactly true. That's not really an accurate statement, and that it really is this process. So I came up with this gluten sensitivity spectrum, which I'll use to try and illustrate what's really happening here. So if you're on the high end of the spectrum, we'll call that a 10. You're clinically celiac disease. You've got total villus atrophy. You've got autoimmune activity. You likely have a ton of symptoms. You have chronic inflammation. You may have, but not necessarily, but you likely have some digestive issues, and you certainly would have intestinal permeability along with that. So that's a 10, easy diagnosed, no problem. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're at a 0, it means you could have all the wheat and gluten you want and be perfectly fine. And it's possible. I won't say that that's not possible for people to maybe there are certain people that actually thrive on this stuff. I suspect if you're on that low end of the spectrum, if you're at a 0, you probably have, or you possibly have some ancestry in the Middle or Near East, where you would have. This is where agriculture began in this region known as the Fertile Crescent. And it would have given you a bit of a head start to adapt to eating grains and gluten. And that head start would be somewhere in the neighborhood of anywhere from 3 to 4 to up to 7,000 years or so. As a side note, one of the things that I hear a lot of is we've been eating this stuff for 10,000 years or so. Why all of a sudden is it a problem? Or they think it's kind of BS. They think gluten sensitivity is sort of BS. But there's some problems with that statement. First of all, yes, agriculture began 10,000 years ago. But if you look at in the context of evolution, 10,000 years is just a blip on the map. There's really not likely to be enough time to adapt to eating things like gluten and grains and cereals and things like that. So the next thing is that the truth is, no, we haven't all been eating grains for 10,000 years. Like I said, agriculture, yes, agriculture began 10,000 years ago, but it began in this very small region known as the Fertile Crescent, which is that Middle and Near East region. By that time, humans had migrated to into Europe and into the Far East, and it took agriculture thousands of more years for it to reach those parts of the world where humans were had already migrated to. And so, if you were in that Fertile Crescent region, you would have eaten grains 10,000 years ago. But if you're in other parts of the world, it would have taken quite a while. So it's a much more accurate statement to say a small percentage of people have been eating grains for 10,000 years. And that's why the further you travel from that Fertile Crescent region, the higher rates of celiac disease that you see, generally speaking, although that's starting to change too. As even people in that Fertile Crescent region are seeing higher rates of celiac disease because of the newer wheat plant. And that's I'll make one last point regarding that. The wheat that we eat today is been hybridized and sort of pasteurized into a completely new plant. So it's we've only been consuming that for 40 or 50,000 years. So if you consider that 10,000 years is really a blip on the map as far as being able to adapt to eating a new food, imagine how short a period of time 40 or 50 years is. But anyway, sorry, a little tangent there. But getting back to the scale here, like I said, if you're at a Marsh 0, chances are you've had some better adaptation to eating grains and gluten for whatever reason. I suspect that most people are somewhere in the middle of the scale. Just from my experience and working with clients and research that I've done, I think most people are in the middle here. So there is a method that's used to measure the damage done to the villi in the small intestine. It's called the Marsh Score or Marsh Scale. So a score of 0 indicates that the villi are completely healthy and fully grown and there's no issues there. A score of Marsh 4 means that the villi are completely wiped out, and that would typically you require a Marsh 3 or 4 to be diagnosed celiac disease. So does that mean that if you're a Marsh 1 or Marsh 2, then it's perfectly fine? Of course not. Like I said, this is a process. And it doesn't go just from Marsh 1 to Marsh, it doesn't jump to Marsh 2 to Marsh 3. Even within those ranges, there's this process that happens in the gradual blunting of the villi. In fact, even with Marsh 1, there's immune activity, there's inflammation. Within Marsh 1, the villi look completely healthy, but there's an increase in something called intraepithelial lymphocytes, which is basically your white blood cells of the immune system. So even when the villi look completely normal, we know there's still inflammation, there's still intestinal permeability, there's still the beginnings of an immune response. So gluten sensitivity for some people can really be described as a pre-celiac state. It's really the same disease in some cases. It's the immune system attacking the body's own tissue, in this case the villi, the small intestine. It just hasn't gotten to that Marsh 3 point, so it's considered subclinical. It can't be clinically diagnosed celiac disease. So does that make sense? Okay. Now, I will say that it's very possible for some people to heal and actually be able to eat wheat again. There's no way to really know what percentage of people that is, but if, and this is a big if gluten sensitivity is secondary to some other issue, which could be another food sensitivity or something called SIBO, a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or some other intestinal issue, some other digestive issue, it's possible that if you remove that initial, that primary issue and allow the body to heal, it's possible that someone could go back to eating wheat without an issue. Again, there's no way to know, there's no data, there's really no research on this stuff, so there's no way to know what percentage of people fall into that category. But if you want to know where you are on the scale and what direction you're headed in, the only way to really do that is some self-experimentation. If you've completely removed gluten from your diet and have seen dramatic improvements, then I would say that's really all you need to know. There's absolutely no nutritional need for it, and certainly no benefit to eating it, except for maybe just the joy of eating bread or pizza, and maybe some social aspect to it, which I actually think is relevant. It's something to consider if it really affects the quality of your life. I think pleasure is an essential nutrient, so I don't want to discount the importance of that. So if your symptoms were relatively mild and you want to try at some point to reintroduce wheat into your diet, that's really something you might consider. I'm not here telling you if you have celiac disease, then you should go out and eat gluten. Obviously, if you have celiac disease, you can't do that. But it's really up to you to decide if you want to reintroduce wheat or not into your diet. If the symptoms seem to be somewhat mild. Personally, I know I can get away with eating it sometimes with, fairly mild and even tolerable symptoms. That said, I can count on one hand the amount of times that I've eaten it in the past 2 or 3 years, simply because I don't need it. I actually enjoy food more now than I did when I was eating it. So it's just not worth it to me. But you have to gather as much info as you can and make that decision for yourself. One last point on this that I do want to make is that the farming practices that are used to raise corn and wheat and other grains and legumes, known as monocropping, is actually highly unsustainable, and it's one of the things that's really destroying the environment. So it's just one more reason why I don't think that these are ideal foods for humans or for our planet. So anyway, there you go. There's my gluten sensitivity spectrum. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found that useful and helpful. That's it for now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.